everybody. I have an announcement. I'm published! So, this is just the proof copy. The others will be coming soon. So, pick them up on Amazon, and Reader's World is going to have them too. So, yeah. So if you want to look, you can see it. This one is called Inescapable, The Beginning. The one that's at the editor right now is Inescapable, Remembering. And then there's a third one I'm still writing that goes with this. So, yeah. But what I'm going to read for you today is an excerpt from my other series, Sophie Cullen's Mysteries. She is my version of a modern-day Nancy Drew. And I will say this is rated PG-13. Tuesday morning, this one takes up, this is close to the end of the book, but this is the funeral, the reading of the will. Tuesday morning was bright and clear as Sophie strolled through the ladies' ready-to-wear department with Kate. She'd been given specific instructions by Old Man Johnson to pick out something appropriate to wear to the funeral. An hour and a half later, and Kate at her wit's end, Sophie finally decided on a dress to wear. "I'd gone much faster if you'd just let me wear my jeans," she said sarcastically, plopping down in a chair in front of Old Man Johnson's desk. "Probably, but I want you looking like the proper little lady you are. You'll need to be on your best behavior and watch your language. None of that stuff you've been spouting around here. I've let you get away with it far too long." He smiled over his glasses at her. "Now, go get ready. The funeral is at 1. We'll want to get there early to get a seat. I'm pretty sure the whole town is going to turn out for this, especially since Caroline is really making a big deal of it." "Eesh, this sucks," she thought, walking back to her room. "Don't know why I have to wear my jeans aren't good enough. They're new. Got them last Friday. In my tea yesterday. Gonna have my coat on anyway. Nobody's gonna see what I'm wearing anyhow." Sulking, she slammed the door extra hard to make her point. She heard the muffled sound of Old Man Johnson laughing as he walked past her door. The funeral home was full, and people were lined up outside. The chief asked those who couldn't get in to go over to the community hall where they had set up several big screen TVs. He told them Mrs. Morrissey had arranged for the whole thing to be televised in closed-circuit TV, so he was sure they wouldn't miss a thing. Sophie and Old Man Johnson sat in the back row along with Jacob Conley and the DA. Sophie poked Old Man Johnson in the arm. "Can't see nothing from here. How about you let me sit on the end?" she whispered. Old Man Johnson nodded, and they switched places. "Now, this is more like it." She could see old Trixie, but not Joey. There was some strange man sitting next to her, consoling her as she sobbed. What a bunch of BS. The service over and the casket loaded in a hearse, the procession wound its way through town to the cemetery. After a brief service there, the pastor invited everyone back to the community hall for the reception. Old Man Johnson loaded Sophie in the car and headed to the Morrissey house. "Where are we going?" Sophie wanted to know. "We're going to the reading of the will." He looked sideways at Sophie, watching her reaction. "What? Is that when they're going to cuff old Trixie? I'm going to get to see it after all? What about Joey? I didn't see him at the funeral," she said in one big breath. "Whoa, slow down. No, they're not going to cuff her there. At least I don't think so. Don't know what about Joey." "We'll just have to wait and see," he said, turning in the driveway. "Now remember, your best behavior. You hear me?" "Yeah. No sulking either." They walked up to the front door and were greeted by an elderly gentleman in a black suit. "Right this way," he indicated that they should follow. Sophie could hear the other people talking as they walked towards the room at the end of the hall. The voices were louder here, but stopped as they entered. "Geez, you'd think we were from outer space or something. Don't like people staring." "Please, take a seat," the gentleman said. Sophie looked wide-eyed around the room. It was the dining room with a big table surrounded by a dozen chairs. Old Man Johnson led Sophie to the chair next to the end of the table. There were 2 other people seated there. Sophie sat down in the chair Old Man Johnson indicated she should. She shoved her hands in the pockets and sunk back into her coat, the hood almost covering her face. "This is a bunch of BS. I'm not interested in some old will. I want to see old Trixie get hers. Old man Johnson elbowed her. Sit up and act like a lady, he whispered, and take off your coat. Sophie unbuttoned her coat, took it off, and hung it on the back of her chair. She felt naked and very uncomfortable in the blue dress Kate had helped pick out. Kate said it matched her eyes. A bunch of BS, Sophie had thought at the time. She watched as the people filed in and filled the chairs around the table, some of them whispering to each other, others acting like they didn't know why they were there. One old man at the other end of the table looked like he'd rather be anywhere else but here. I know how you feel. Old Trixie arrived, followed by Conley. Old man Johnson had introduced him at the funeral. Conley took a seat at the head of the table, and old Trixie took a seat to the right of him, looking like the cat who had swallowed the canary. Sophie looked around for Joey, but didn't see him. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. If everyone is ready, we will proceed with the reading of the last will and testament of Eustace Morrissey, Conley said, opening the file folder in front of him. Conley droned on, reading how Morrissey's personal effects were to be distributed. There were many smiles and a few grumbles around the table. Sophie began fidgeting, and old man Johnson quietly poked her arm. She turned and glared at him. He scowled at her. She scooted back in the chair, sat up straight, folded her hands on her lap, and stared straight ahead. Old man Johnson smiled. Conley had reached the part of the will about the distribution of the money and real estate properties. Sophie noticed old Trixie perked up and sat up straighter in her chair as she glanced around the table at the rest of the heirs. Her eyes fell on Sophie. What the hell is she doing here? She demanded, almost coming out of her chair, glaring at Conley. She's mentioned in the will, he said quietly. Shall we proceed? What do you mean, mentioned in the will? She snorted. She's nothing but street trash. I'm sure my husband did not know this person. Regardless, she is mentioned in the will. Conley turned and looked at her. Can we continue? Yes, please, she said, regaining her composure. And finally, I leave all monies, stocks, bonds, and all real estate properties to my granddaughter, Sophie Marie Collins. The silence in the room was deafening. Sophie sat, mouth open, staring at old Trixie. Did I just hear right? Now, that wasn't my name he just read. He's got it all wrong. I don't have a family. Mom said so. No, old Trixie shrieked, jumping up and tipping her chair over. What the hell are you talking about? I'm his wife. I'm entitled. You're not getting a goddamn penny, you little bitch. Her eyes shot daggers down the table at Sophie, and then realizing where she was and all heads had turned staring at her, she pulled herself together. I'll fight this. There isn't any possible way that that is the real will. I've seen the real will, and this is not it. She turned to Conley. You're my lawyer. How could you let this happen? Don't just sit there. Do something, she demanded. No, I'm Eustace's lawyer, and this is his last will and testament, he said, quietly looking up as Chief Markham entered the room. I believe the chief is here to see you, Mrs. Morrissey. Sophie watched as old Trixie turned ghostly white, her hands beginning to shake. This is better than I thought, she giggled inwardly and wiggled in her seat. I'm going to get to see old Trixie get cuffed and hauled out of here after all. Hours later, Joey had been tracked down and arrested, and old Trixie was safely behind bars. Case closed.